do I get to see myself so that I can adjust it? Good.
Hi everyone. This is Maggie from Book Soup. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. We're actually at our writer's house, Antonio Damasio, and he will be discussing feeling and knowing. Antonio Damasio is a very, very world-renowned neuroscientist and physician, and he will be talking today about his book that just came out today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn my computer over to him. Just give me a second. Perfect.
Very good. Excellent. So, good evening to everyone that is watching and listening, and I'm very happy to be here. I was going to say I'm very happy to be here at Book Soup, but I'm not at Book Soup. I'm at home. So, but you know, there are books behind me, so it looks like a bookshop. Not quite as pretty as Book Soup, but I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Maggie, for being here. It makes things a little bit more easy on my side. So let me tell you a little bit about this book that just came out today. It's really the very beginning of its public life in the United States and in the United Kingdom, and that's the original. I wrote it in English, as you probably imagine, although right now there are several translations already. But I love the book. I think books. It's very important to see how books look, and probably some of you will have seen it. It sort of fits in your hands, and it's a very special book. Let me tell you why. So some of you may have read previous books of mine or may know about my scientific work through scientific papers, and it has fundamentally to do with brain and mind. That's sort of the easy way to describe it. I have been investigating for many years the kinds of mechanisms in the human brain that will support this spectacular set of events that we call, for lack of better words, the human mind. Over the years, I have concentrated on different topics in this area. The fundamental idea is trying to understand how is it that living organisms, such as we are, can produce something as complex as the mind, which not only presents us with representations of the world around, but representations of our own world, and allows us to communicate with others and to live in community and so forth. So that's sort of the very general goal. And this is a goal that psychologists traditionally have undertaken. Within as a secondary development, people who later became known as neuroscientists, such as myself, who are really sort of specialization of psychology when it looks particularly at the nervous system. And of course, this has also been traditionally an area of study for philosophers, because for a very long time it was philosophers that are these days known as philosophers of mind who were interested to know about how minds were put together. And eventually, as facts from science became known, facts from biology, from neuroscience, philosophers have also used those facts to discuss what is it that is going on in this relationship between brain and mind. Now, I began quite early in my career to be interested in processes that had to do with affect. So by affect, one means processes such as emotion, feeling, and I was very interested in the fact, which came from observations in the laboratory, that affect had a role to play in decisions. So very often people think that we make our decisions and go about life deciding what to do on the basis of data, on the basis of clean, pure reasoning. But one thing that became apparent to me and to colleagues of mine early on in my career was that this was not quite true. There are, of course, several decisions that you can make purely on the basis of clean reasoning and data, but a lot of the time, the decisions we make, especially the decisions that are personal, that have to do with complex issues of our life, of relations to others, how we deal with our families, how we deal with work, how we deal with our own creation of new objects. For example, if you're an artist or a scientist or a builder, all of that has a huge amount of component from affect. So one thing that interested me very, very early on was that we are we have this phenomena such as emotion and feeling playing roles that go well beyond the decorative role that very often people assign to them. And sometimes people don't even assign them a decorative role. They just think feelings are a nuisance. But of course, they're not. I mean, they are a nuisance if they're very negative, but they're far more than just being an inconvenience. On the contrary. So, to make a long story short, that became the focus of my research, and it has now been many, many years in which I continue researching different aspects of this phenomena. And what is interesting is then to see how that research has taken me and my colleagues to investigate the sources of this phenomena and how they're put together in terms of the biology, in terms of the physiology, and what do they actually bring in addition to the obvious fact that they make our life more or less colorful from day to day, because that's the role of feelings. And one thing, let me add, that is very important is the realization that feelings and affect in general are extremely connected to a phenomenon that is very, very central in modern science and in modern philosophy, and that is consciousness. So my book, by the way, is called, as you know, Feeling and Knowing, but the subtitle is Making Minds Conscious. So I'm making it clear for those of you who may want to read it that this is about feeling, it's about knowledge, and it's about the fact that consciousness is related. We will see in a minute how that happens to be. So the little bit more in terms of the history behind this book. In 2018, I had a previous book which was called The Strange Order of Things, and contrary to this, this is a big, heavy book. This actually is, fortunately, a smaller book. In that book, the intent was to place these phenomena like emotion and feeling and consciousness in the sort of trajectory of human beings and sort of place them at their points in evolution. And one reason why the book was called Strange Order of Things was because the order that emerged once you thought about it was not quite what you expected. And there's a strangeness to that. But I will leave you, some of you may well have read that book, and I will leave that aside to come to the current book, which was conceived as a sequel to Strange Order of Things, and very, very focused on this phenomenon of feeling and its significance for us as human beings in terms of the running of our lives and in terms of the production of this spectacular event that we have every moment, and that all of you listening to me and that myself and my wonderful host are having, which is consciousness. We're all conscious, or we would not know that this is happening to us. And how this book emerged is from a request from my editor at Pantheon, Dan Frank, who several years ago said, it would be wonderful if you would distill your ideas on feeling and turn them into a book that would be more direct, a sort of series of essays in which you describe what is feeling, what is emotion, how they can be related to consciousness, how they can be related to decisions, and so forth. But don't do it in a tome with 400 pages. Do it in a way that is more accessible. Not easier necessarily, because actually writing things that are more concentrated turns out to be much more difficult than when you have tons of pages where you can sort of splurge. But more pointed, so that people could literally surround the topic and learn after finishing a brief chapter that is a little bit like a poem. I actually, when my editor was talking to me, I said, what I really want to do is create a haiku, like a brief Japanese poem in which everything is distilled down to its essence, so that people can grasp fairly quickly and get on with it, move on to the next one. So that's feeling and knowing for you. What some of the highlights that I want to give you. The main highlight is this: feelings, really come in two varieties, and everyone that is listening to me has experienced them. You have experienced feelings that are directly related to the life in your organism, and I will itemize some for you: hunger, thirst, pain, well-being in general, discomfort, malaise. These are fundamental feelings, and they are coming out of the life in your body. They are representations of what is going on in your body at a certain moment, and they are telling you in very direct ways that something is needed and that you have to take action in order to correct what is wrong, if there's something wrong, or use the opportunity that everything is going well and do something with it. What is going on, for example, pain or hunger or thirst. If you're thirsty, the information that the feeling of thirst is giving you is incredibly important, because it's essential for your organism to acquire more liquid in order to continue its life. And if you're in pain, you need to investigate the cause of that pain. Were you hurt? Do you have an illness? Should you seek attention from a doctor? So those are the incredibly important information that feelings are producing for you. Now, just think about the beauty of this. So we're talking about something that obviously happened very early in evolution, but happened early in evolution after there were nervous systems. So one thing that I point out in the book is that, for example, small organisms, take, for example, bacteria or paramecia, organisms that have sometimes one cell or a few cells, but don't have a nervous system. Are they going to be capable of having a feeling like we do? Well, I tell you what my opinion is. My opinion, based on the science, is that they don't. So those organisms are capable of running their lives, and yet they do not feel in the way that you or I feel. And why is that? I believe that the main difference is that we have a nervous system, and it is that nervous system that allows us in coalition with the body to generate what we call feeling. So those organisms can run their lives, but instead of having pain or well-being or thirst, they just have mechanisms that will allow them to seek a better position in the environment or get to the nourishment if they need it, defend themselves if need be, but they do not have this possibility of feeling something and therefore knowing what is going on right or not right in your organism. So when you think about this, just ponder this fact. The emergence of feeling, the appearance of feeling in the history of life writ large, is the inaugural event in the history of consciousness. Because once you get to feel thirst or hunger, once you get to feel pleasure or pain, once you feel desire, you are feeling, and that feeling is automatically a conscious event. If it weren't conscious, it wouldn't be of any good. It wouldn't do any good to you. It wouldn't help you. It wouldn't make you go and do the next thing. So the moment feelings emerged in evolution, consciousness emerged with it. And one of the things that I explain in this book is that you have to see consciousness as we have it today as the result of the development of this machinery for feeling, which is then applied to anything else that is going on. So, for example, right now, I am sort of looking at myself speaking to you on the screen of a device, and I know that because I know that I am here as a living organism. I know that myself is here, and I know it because I feel that I am right now in this position in my study talking to you at Book Soup. So this is an incredibly important thing, and I don't want you to dismiss feelings as something trite or trivial. And above all, I'm asking you very, very seriously and deeply, don't dismiss feelings in comparison with all the other great feats of our mind, such as our perception of the outside world or our ability to reason and to create. Those are wonderful things, of course. I mean, I would be the last person to attack creativity, of course not. But what I want you is to have a sense that where the history began was with feeling. That came first. And as that occurred historically, it gave the possibility, as organisms became more complex and had bigger and better nervous systems, it gave them the possibility of having perceptions of the outside world, gave them the possibility of reasoning, gave them the possibility of generating memory, gave them the possibility of creating things. So it's a great big story, but it's a story that begins with feeling and with consciousness. Those two, hand in hand, are the key to making our minds become what they have become, fortunately. So feeling and the knowledge they bring, which ends up being consciousness, is the key to this book. Now, one more thing that I want to tell you before I silence myself and allow you to ask me questions, because that's a way always of clarifying things. I talked about feelings, and some of you may have wondered, why is he talking about feelings and not emotions? Or are feelings and emotions the same thing, just with different words? And the answer is definitely not. Okay, so what do I mean? Feelings are subjective states. So feelings are things that are happening in your mind. And they're happening in your mind and giving you knowledge, information about your life. Those basic feelings that I enumerated. And those feelings have a name for them. The name, I baptize them as homeostatic feelings. Now, homeostatic comes from the word homeostasis, which simply means life regulation. We all, as living organisms, need to regulate our life. This is something that is accomplished automatically to begin with, and then is finished by our consciousness. So, if you think about our life regulation is a little bit like the small creatures like bacteria, in which there's no nervous system, there's no mind, and yet it's regulated. There is homeostasis. And then things get more complicated once organisms become multicellular and have many systems, such organisms such as ours. Those organisms cannot survive without a nervous system. So if any of you has ever asked the question, why on earth do we have nervous systems? Why do we have nerves and central nervous system, brains, and so forth? The answer is very simple: to help coordinate the regulation of life. So if we were a very simple organism, you can do without a nervous system. You don't need it. And you don't need a complicated nervous system. But if you are complicated like we are, in which we have the things we perceive around us, the things we do, our actions, but we also have the things we think, the things we create, that is only possible through this mechanism of a brain with a nervous system that coordinates functions in an organism and makes it all sort of possible for a period of time, which is the period of a lifetime. So, feelings are directly giving you, first and foremost, a view of the state of life inside your organism, inside your body. But then there are other kinds of feelings which you're very used to, and that's the ones that people pay attention to all the time. And those are the feelings of emotions. So if I would now tell you a joke and you would start laughing, you would laugh because the joke produced an emotion of joy, fun. Or I could tell you a story that would be a sad story. Today, there are plenty of sad stories to tell. So I would tell you a sad story and you would feel sad. You would feel saddened by the story. Or I could tell you something that would make you angry. And that would be yet another emotion. So things like joy, sadness, anger, fear, these are emotions. And they are actions and compositions of actions that we take, normally involving our faces, involving our bodies, and we express being in fear, we express being in joy, we express sadness, and so forth. So those are emotions. And lo and behold, once you are in the emotion of fear, for example, you're alarmed at something, once you are in that emotion, you have a feeling of being in fear. So there is the emotion fear, which is a set of actions, and there's the feeling of fear, which is our perception of our body when we are in a state of fear. So I wanted to make sure that you get this so that when you see the word feeling, you realize that this is a pretty complicated set of phenomena. They're the feelings of our basic body state, such as wellness or sickness and so forth, and they're the feelings that correspond to emotions, and that's another story, okay? And just to give you an idea, the ones that are first and foremost, the ones that came first, are the feelings of our own life state, and then emotions evolved after. All of these, anyway, require brain, require nervous system. And so the good news to report today is that thanks to the science, we now know that nervous systems are needed to have feelings, and that once nervous systems can produce feelings, feelings give you this other beautiful benefit, which is consciousness, which we're all enjoying right now. Because if we weren't conscious, you wouldn't have the foggiest idea of what I'm saying. You would not even know that I'm here. and I wouldn't know that you're there and listening to me. So that's a very important story, the connection of feeling and consciousness. And one last word that I want to say before I shut up, and that is that when I started my investigations as a young scientist, I was convinced, and so is everybody, that this all has to do with the nervous system and the development of the brain. And that's true in great part because without a nervous system, we wouldn't have feelings, we wouldn't have consciousness, we wouldn't have knowledge, perception, all of these beautiful things. What is incorrect, and what you will find in this book, because I explained that, is that in the case of feelings, it's not just what's going on in the nervous system that counts. It's also what is going on in the body. So in the end, feelings, and I'm going to leave you with this thought, feelings are the result of a combination, are the result of a working together of the nervous system on the one hand and of the body on the other. And this ought to make a lot of sense for you because all the feelings that I referred to, those homeostatic feelings like hunger, thirst, well-being, pain, what is that? That is a manifestation, it's an information that you're getting about the state of your body, specifically about the state of life in your body right now. So that's the most important conclusion that I want to share with you. And this book is an attempt at explaining and convincing you of why I think that what I'm saying makes sense and is correct. So thank you very much for your attention. And if you want to ask questions, I'll be pleased.
Let me see if we have any questions. We don't have any questions yet. I do have a question for you,
Please.
if you don't mind. What life forms do you think can feel feelings and emotions?
Life forms that have a nervous system, life forms that are complex enough to require the organization that nervous systems produce. So generally, when you think about microscopic organisms, I mentioned bacteria, for example, I think that they have a complicated life. They have homeostasis, they regulate their life, but they do not have the possibility of feeling. In other words, they cannot represent to themselves in their minds, which they don't have, they cannot represent what is going on inside them. And we, and many other organisms, obviously before us, have this combination. Because we have nervous systems, we are able to represent what is going on inside us. And then later on, we're able to represent what's outside. Like, for example, you can represent the light is coming down outside our window. We can see the hills. That's the external world. When you feel, you represent your internal world. But it's only organisms with nervous system that can do that. Then the other thing that is important to note is this thing that I just said about this combination of body and nervous system that gives you the possibility of feeling. And I might say one more thing is that this is not just about size. You may say, well, we're big, we can have feelings because we have nervous systems and we're big animals. Well, you can have a fly. A fly can have a very complex nervous system, a nervous system that actually looks, in terms of the design, very much like our nervous system, except it's very teeny. And the fly, if I would have to bet, I would say the fly has feelings. The fly is capable of feeling well or not well, depending on how their life is being run. Okay?
So it's not something that would be just exclusive to mammals, or
not at all. No, and for example, when you look, for example, do the fish have feelings? I would suspect yes. So this is not just about mammals or birds or reptiles or fish. In fact, all the vertebrates, I'm quite convinced, have the possibility of feeling, and they're conscious animals, which is one reason why one needs to think carefully about what one does with them. It's not just their toys or furniture to play with. So we and of course, what we as human beings have is a very complex mind, and that mind with all of these this amazing furniture is such that it allows you to have complex thoughts, allows you to be creative, and it is for certain the most complex of the minds that you have available in nature. So even the creatures that are closest to us as mammals are not likely to have the wealth of minds that we have, which is the reason why we also were able to generate history and cultures the way we have, which then in turn reflect on our lives and influence our lives. I think we have a lot of questions here now.
Wonderful. Can you explain the neural basis of dreaming and emotional processing?
Well, I cannot explain it all in all the detail because there's obviously a very complicated process. But we have probably the best way of explaining is saying the following: in order to regulate our lives, in order to maintain life, we and of course many other creatures have cycles of sleep and wakefulness. Sleep is necessary to actually regenerate a lot of cellular processes that have been sort of dilapidated during waking hours. And so sleep clearly has a role to play in generating a period of rest and generating a period of recuperation for certain systems and organs in our living body, and the nervous system, obviously, very importantly. During that period, for reasons, of course, which we do not know, during that period of sleep, there are different phases, and the nervous system goes through different levels of operation, some leading to a deeper sleep, a deeper level of lack of consciousness. And during that sleep, there is one period in particular, which is associated with rapid eye movements, during which you are asleep, but you are also conscious because you have dreams, and you know that you're conscious because the next day in the morning when you woke up, you can remember that you had a wonderful dream or that you had a nightmare, for that matter. And so it's during that period of supposed recovery that you have these periods of sleep. They're not continuous, these periods of sleep in which you have dreams as well. But your consciousness is not there. So in terms of the outside world, is there in terms of the inside world. So you're conscious in your mind that something, a story is taking place, the story in your dream. But so there is consciousness, but you actually call it paradoxical consciousness because for all intents and purposes, you are asleep and therefore you are not conscious. But there are phases of sleep in which you are literally without dreams and you are sleeping very profoundly. Not quite as profoundly as in anesthesia, but something like it. And anesthesia, by the way, is the prime example of a loss of consciousness that is induced by a particular molecule, by a particular drug, and that removes consciousness completely, very much like in certain states of brain disease, such as coma.
Let me see. These are really small words.
Yeah, so we need to have.
I work as a coach to help people be better leaders, and the term I use is models.
Moods.
such as a mood of ambition and resignation, people. What would you say a mood is?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I never thought about moods in relation to training and inspiring people, but I can understand it. So a mood, in the end, is a state of both feeling and emotion. You are in a certain mood, because always think about what words are telling you. When you say you are in a mood, you're describing something that is in your mind. You're describing something that you appreciate through your subjectivity. Why? Because you're conscious, because you have a way of inspecting your mind and reflecting on your mind. But a mood is one of these ambiguous terms, because it reflects what you're feeling, but it also is connected with a certain attitude that people have, which is an attitude that can be, for example, if the mood is positive, it can be an attitude of being forthcoming, sort of projecting yourself forward, or if the mood is negative, sort of diminishing yourself, reducing yourself in sort of your position in the world around. But so I think it's interesting. Think of moods as a hybrid. It's a bit of a feeling, a bit of an emotive process. But the reason why you use it as a coach is because that is a way of motivating people. That is a way of making people feel in a certain way for their activities. Okay?
Mm-hmm. You got a message that says, "Thank you, Antonio, from the Philippines."
Oh, very good. Wow. So you go all the way to the Philippines?
We broadcast all over the world.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I didn't expect that. So I wonder what time is it in the Philippines?
I don't know, but you're clearly devoted. If feelings are giving us a sense of the state of of life in our body and reflect highly complex systems, can our feelings be wrong? As in our complexity, it misfires and points us to a wrong analysis.
That is a fabulous question. Thank you. I wonder where you are. Probably not in the Philippines. Anyway, so that is a wonderful question, because it is quite possible for feelings to give you the wrong idea, to give you the wrong impression. But you have to pay very attention to the fact that when that happens, that is actually a sign of dysfunction. That is, to be quite specific, a sign of disease. So, for example, if you are depressed and if your nervous system is not operating the way it should, it can give you feelings about your body that actually can be entirely misleading and can be wrong, because they are a misinterpretation of what is going on in your body, or can be doing something also very intriguing. It can actually modify the state of your body so that you are having a problem. You're changing the configuration of your body in such a way that you're now having a negative feeling, and that's real. So that information is correct. But you're having that feeling because your nervous system made you have that state of the body that produced that negative feeling. So you see how complicated this is. If we are perfectly fine and if our life is going well, you have the life in your body being translated in the form of feelings, which is very helpful. And that translation is faithful. It's portraying what really is going on, and that's good news. But you can have this ways into going into pathology in which you either misread what's in your body, or worse, you transform your body in a negative way, and then you read what is going on wrong, and that's when you have the bad feelings. And of course, it's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking. But this, for everyone that is listening, just think of how complex this system is, and try not to think of the brain as something that is just related to data and to the outside world and to intelligence, quote unquote. Think of it as the way in which we appreciate the state of our life. That is the most precious thing we can have, by the way. It's all about what is going on in our lives, in terms of what we create and do, the relations we have to other human beings, the love of the problems, of the difficulties. All of that can only be appreciated in the setting of a life inside a body, and that life needs to be well lived in terms of its regulation. And feelings are the monitors of that life. And that's why, fortunately for most people, in most circumstances, feelings give you the right information. And if they don't, you need to seek help so that they give you the right information, and that you can really correct what is going on there that is wrong.
I should have brought my reading glasses. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, we have an answer to our question. The question. The time in the Philippines is similar to that in Australia. Grateful greetings from here as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Okay.
If anyone has any other questions, this will be the time to ask. Let's see, ask a question. One more. If I understand you right, feelings are conscious perception of our emotions. Does this mean feelings are conditioned or shaped by our cultures or contexts about how to interpret these inner experiences?
That's a very interesting question as well. You have terrific questions. Let me make a couple of comments on your words. If I understand you right, feelings are conscious perceptions of our emotions. Yes, you understand me right. That's exactly what I want to say. I would just be cautious with the word perception. And this is a technicality. And the reason why I'm being cautious is this. When you look out, for example, I'm looking at the screen on which I'm reading the questions, and you're probably looking at the screen where I am at your end. Those are, in the technical sense, visual perceptions, mine and yours. And they are representations of something that is in the outside world and is coming to me through my eyes. It's coming to me also through my ears. And that's perception. So you really generate a representation. It's like a sketch, an audio sketch or a visual sketch. And then you generate those images in your mind. With feeling, it is a perception, quote unquote, but remember some of the things that I said at the beginning. It's a hybrid. It's actually made of an interaction between what is going on in your mind and what is going on in your body. So the two things are together, and to call that a perception is too simple, is to give the impression that it's like the brain was taking a snapshot of our body, taking a snapshot of the breathing and of the guts and of the skin. And it is infinitely more complex. Just think of this. You have all of these organ systems. For example, right now we're breathing, our heart is beating, blood is pulsing through our arteries everywhere in our body. There's a certain amount of tension that is signified by our blood pressure. There's a certain temperature. We have guts. If we have just eaten, you feel in a certain way. If you don't, you feel in a different way. So what a feeling is, when you say, I feel queasy, I'm not feeling well. Or when you say, I'm feeling fantastic. This is a composite of all these bits of information. And the way, as I explain in Feeling and Knowing, the way this is arrived at is by having an interaction between the nervous system that probes the body everywhere and the body that responds with certain molecules to the nervous system. So this is not like my looking out and seeing the mountains. This is much more complicated. When I look out and see the mountains don't interact with me. They stay there, I'm here. When I find how I feel in my body, my nervous system is going out to the body, getting signals, and the body is responding to the nervous system. So it's a commingling of the two. And this is actually one of the central aspects of this new book. I had hinted at this in prior scientific papers and books, but this is the time in which I explain it more carefully and in connection with consciousness. Thank you very much. That was a terrific question.
Let me see if there's any more. They've already been asked. Okay, those have been asked. If you have any more questions, we have about 5 more minutes.
Oh, somebody in chat says, say something nice. Well, I hope that what
you may also say something nice.
I say something nice to me, for example. Why don't we start with you? You say something nice. Okay, another question. Well, this is another question. Very helpful. Thank you. Great.
Let's see. Sorry.
So, if I understand you correctly, feelings are conscious perceptions of our emotions. Does this mean feelings are conditioned or shaped by our cultures? Yes, indeed. Feelings are very much shaped by our cultures, but not fully. In other words, if you have something wrong with your life, if you have, for example, if you've got a COVID infection, or if you've got the flu, you bet you're going to have different feelings, and those feelings are going to give you, you may have a fever, you may feel beaten up and hurting, and so forth. Those feelings are not likely to be influenced by the culture. What the culture does is influence how you express them. So if you feel bad in certain cultures, you're obliged to shut up and feel bad with yourself and not tell anybody, or you only tell those people that you trust, and you do it almost in confidence. Whereas in certain other cultures, you complain and you cry and you scream and you can express them. So clearly, what the culture normally creates as a frame around your behavior is going to have an enormous impact in how you express those feelings. And eventually, it can also shape them, because if you're in a culture that does not allow you to express feelings, you're more likely to be constrained and not even want to acknowledge that they are there. Okay, so yes, the cultural, we are immersed in a culture. We immersed through language and through the interactions we have with others. So that's obviously very important.
Wow, this is a lot.
What do you see? Are all feelings a result from body's reaction to external stimuli? No, in fact, the majority of our feelings, the ones that I call homeostatic, are the result of influences from the inside, their internal influences. On the other hand, and of course there are feelings that come from the outside, and very often, for example, if you look at a painting and you love the painting, you love the shapes, the colors, the structure, you're going to feel well about that. And that is a feeling that came from the perception of the outside world. That's obviously a different thing. But feelings come in every aspect. You have the basic ones, the ones that give you access to your body and to the state of life in your body, and give you access to consciousness, as I explain in the book, or the ones that come from the outside world. Let me see. What do you view as the relationship between feelings and creativity? Oh, this is very important because you cannot be creative if you don't feel. First of all, feelings give you the motivation for your creativity. Most people whenever you do something creative, whether it is hugging somebody else and being positive and constructive in the life of another person, or if your creativity is to have a project, build a building, investigate a problem, paint a painting, make a sculpture, all of those are generally inspired by a feeling. You can have, of course, plenty of good things that you can do that are very factual, but you do them well and you do them with a great sense, or the possible sense of innovation, once they are inspired by feelings. So feelings and creativity go side by side. And of course, you cannot have any of that without the consciousness that feelings bring you in.
Wonderful.
Okay?
I think we have.
You should.
Do you have any comments on Ian McGilchrist's perspective?
That would take a long time, but it's a remarkable colleague, and it's a very interesting perspective on the world of affect. Do we have any other one?
We've got one last. Can you differentiate the feeling of creativity and creativity?
Can you differentiate the feeling of creativity and creativity? Oh yes, So the feelings that give you creativity, they sort of push you in that direction. But the creativity itself is a process of reasoning and try out. You are creative when you, for example, if I want to give you an explanation, which I am doing right now, I have certain ideas about what these things are, the feelings, the creativity. And then to give you the explanation, I need to make a rapid plan of how I'm going to explain this to you. The making of the plan is the creativity. The feeling is what impelled me to give you the answer in the first place. So feelings are like, pushing you in a certain direction. Creativity is what happens when you apply a set of rules and your knowledge to constructing something that is new, whether it is writing a poem or a book or building a building. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you. Do you have any last remarks?
I hope that people enjoyed this conversation, and I hope that they enjoy the book. They can read it and take something good away from it. Okay, and we'll say goodbye to the Philippines.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Very enjoyable, and I greatly appreciate your time. I've read your Japanese version books, but now I'm living in the Philippines and pursuing neuroscience. Thank you so much, Antonio.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to our guests. This was a wonderful discussion. We are very, very, very excited to have Feeling and Knowing on our shelves in Book Soup. If you'd like to order a copy, please click on the green button below the viewer screen that says Purchase Feeling and Knowing here. Besides that, as always, please have a good evening, and most importantly, stay safe, everyone. Thank you.